All right, we are prepping to live stream. Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna go back there and put one right there on that table
Okay.
where that coffee is.
I got to work.
We're putting it way far away from everybody. No computers right beside Dana this time.
Thank you.
Now it's a party.
You may want to plug them up. I don't know how long it's been.
Very, getting them to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, let me go move my truck.
Figure it out. He's a smart man.
He's gotta be. To do that, he's gotta be. Oh, my goodness.
Be good.
Looking forward to summer academy next week, just so I can get some training and I'm not running around here.
Sure you will be.
What do you do? Hit his head on a second floor building?
No, he was working outside in the yard and his bare feet stepped up.
You were 6?
Had a slide.
Okay.
I like to win.
Took me a long time to-
I will tell you,
The fundamental one?
Yes.
I just didn't.
Oh, very cool.
I read it.
And what was the increase?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Question.
I put this one, that's total.
I'll tell you.
Yes.
Some twice.
Yeah, I know.
This is up to
Yeah.
him.
I think it's just something like all this stuff that you guys like to always think of, like,
Yeah.
Couple in
Yeah.
Westfield,
Fine.
couple in North County.
I didn't get a single desk. I got.
I know less about elementary than everybody.
Or something that-
You know what I should have done? I don't really look back at it. That's some of my thing I would have known, but I thought, yeah. And I was like,
Yeah.
Sign, no, I didn't get the sign on yet.
Oh, it's all those extra. Well, he's still in,
See.
You want to see me? Hi. Like a wall over here.
Going to 9 years, so 9 years.
Hey, Gary. How you doing?
He gets cuts. Very nice. Gets a haircut every 4 weeks. Yeah.
Still can't remember.
they underpaid like water. I know, they were like.
Oh, Monday morning, I forgot that the trains were going, and I pulled into my, and I'm like, okay, whoops.
Well, it is before the end of the year for certification, so it's huge, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe here.
That's been good.
I'm already worried about mine, and my contract doesn't expire till 2027.
Well, I have to have the reading stuff now too, the reading and the, I got my reading done this year. I'm
I
like,
said,
check it out.
needs repair.
Good, see this off. But next summer's New Year, I'll get it done now. That's the only thing I
Just
think.
another thing, Joe.
On the road.
Well, he could, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And better events.
More classes there.
Excellent. Yes, I think so.
I did 22.
Yeah.
You know, it's probably made those caution. I don't know how it's going to be.
What cuts I can pass around. I guess, I mean, might as well. Welcome to our crib, such as it is. There's training going on. It makes the place lively. It's nice going into the room and going, hi, everybody, and they go, hi, Lee. That's nice, always like, well. Oh, no, it's nice to feel important even when you're not.
Oh.
And they seem to be very excited downstairs. They seem very happy. We have a couple of really great trainers, so that helps. Hi, everybody. I know all of you. I respect you. So this is gonna be a good year. I think we're gonna have a great an improved contract. Gary's and Dave, you're doing the money stuff, Gary?
We were hoping we could do introductions so everybody knew who was in the room.
Yeah, sure,
And
absolutely.
then, but somebody's gonna have to give you a different pen. 'Cause
You're not on the click.
Sorry. I'm
You and Lori Dart are the two that I'm gonna have to watch.
a nervous habit.
Put it down. Is this going around?
I think so.
Anyone not signed in?
Somebody something?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Lee Bryant. I'm the PCTA president.
I'm Tracy McConnell. I'm the PCTA vice president and a third grade teacher.
I'm Brendan Pickett. I'm the FBA director and a high school teacher.
Mary Ellen People, I'm a PCT member, first grade teacher.
Nina Collins, Human Resources.
Dave Richmond, payroll. Gary Jefferson, finance.
Lori Dart, Legal.
Mike Vicky, Human Resources.
Hi, and I'm Stephanie Woodford. I'm the deputy superintendent.
Me, Yeah.
Introduce our other people back here. Yeah.
Janet Cunningham, instructional Calvin Hunsinger and PCTA Executive Board.
Paula Stevens, BCTA staff.
Pamela Morse, PCTA and currently teaching at Johns Hopkins.
Nicholas Esposito, Tyrone Middle, PCTA executive board.
Shannon Hobbs, Crest Elementary PCTA member.
Oh, I'm Cheryl. My office is back there. I moved over here, so I'll be back.
I've actually tried to put together a really big team of people because I want to get a lot of interest. I've been soliciting since October, trying to build a team. So all these people, so a lot of them are not here yet today, this summer. Yeah, summer break. A lot of them are gone, but many people have questions about the budget, about the money, and whenever they come out, I go, you know what? Join the bargaining team. Here you go, join the bargaining team and you'll learn about it. And then you can take my place because I'm old.
Well, we asked Gary to really do an in-depth explanation of the budget instead of just bottom dollars, really explain how the budget works. And so he's gonna take some time doing that, and we were hoping it could be a little bit interactive, questions asked of him, and he's going to go pretty deep into it so that everybody's on the same playing field as we move forward.
Great. I have a bunch of handouts. I'm gonna kind of pass these out as we go through the process. But I think there's gonna be 3 of them that will pass out to start.
That's why we brought Mike. Walk over.
Hey, minions, pass stuff out.
I should just be you.
How was like?
This is what they're probably like. The documents that I'm handing out are actually 3 pages from this upcoming budget workshop document, that the board workshop document that we're working on. But I think they're really helpful to try to explain how how the money gets from the state and from our local property taxes to the school district, and what that process looks like. So the first document I think that's going to be most helpful is this graph that walks through the budget cycle. So the budget cycle is something that never, it's an ongoing forever process. As right now, the fiscal year closes in June 30th, so it's a July 1st to June 30th. We are wrapping up the end of the year. That process is going to go until February as we go through audits and all the work that we have to do to prove that our numbers are right. But we're getting started now on next year's process, next year's budget. I think that you've been paying close attention to the state legislature or to the news. You may know that as of right now, on a typical year, we would have a set budget by the state. They would have come up with their numbers and they would have said, this is the dollar amount that you're going to get this next year. The House and the Senate at the state legislature level haven't worked out all those kinks yet, all the details on that. And so the numbers that we'll be talking about today and until we get more solid numbers are kind of the consensus on where we think that we're going to end up at the state level. So it's all subject to change as the state decides what they're going to do and then figures out how they're going to implement their budget plan. So when we look at the top, you know, all of you in your schools know that there's dates certain FTE counts where we go through and we validate the number of students that are in each year's schools. When we add all those up, we get the number of students that are in our district. The state, and we'll go into the numbers here, but the state pays us a certain dollar amount for every student that is in our district. And they set that amount and say everybody in the entire state, every student in the state is going to basically get that amount. And so it just kind of funnels down. When we talk about the students, we have the students that are in your schools, you know, the traditional everyday in-school student. We have still in that traditional bucket, we're going to have our virtual schools students. We're going to have and then outside of that, we're going to have our charter schools. And then we're going to have what we call, or the state calls, the Family Empowerment Scholarship students. And the Family Empowerment Scholarship students are homeschool or private students that still get state funding, but they get the same state funding that a student in our schools get. But it's kind of a competition or for those funds. So the state set aside money for the scholarship program, and that's money that doesn't come to us as a regular school. It's still going to education in the state, but it's a very different platform. So we start out with their FTE counts, and we use that, you know, to determine the staffing levels in our schools. Based on the number of students that are in a school, we have various models and process to figure out how many students, how many teachers, instructional staff, how many support staff should be in every school. So we go through that process as part of the overall budget planning every year. We'll talk about all these concepts as we get a little farther along, but the state, the funds that the district gets, we have our regular, we'll call them the FE funds, that's the state funds and the local funds that we get here. We also get something called capital funds. So when you need your building, you know, when the AC doesn't work, that's a capital item, right? And there's different buckets of capital items. Some of it is preventative maintenance that we do on your schools. Part of it is going to be reconstruction or major project at the school. If it's changing the layout of the school, changing the number of classrooms, changing the style of the school. And then there's all the things like the student laptops, right? And so all of, and every one of your students, you know, through the PCS Connects and the one-to-one, all of those are capital items. Those are big dollar amount items. And so we have the capital, and then we have the referendum. So the referendum, and we'll talk more about this also, but back in November, the voters of Pinellas County voted in what we call a 1 mil, which is 1/1000th of a dollar for every dollar of assessed value that you have in your house. So there's a property assessor and they just value your house or your property. And then there's property taxes that are paid against it. So in that referendum, when it comes to the district as well, has restricted uses. It can only be, used for what we would say compensation and various supplemental programs. But we'll go into those. So state picks up the budget. They set the dollar amount that they want the public school districts across the state to get. There's calculations to say of the total bucket of money that the state is going to set aside or say that the public schools can have. Then there's various calculations, and we'll look at there's this book that you can that actually exists, and it's all these numbers, and it goes through and calculates the actual dollar amount that Pinellas County is going to get, and all 67 counties are listed in here, and all the metrics and the backup to support the dollar amount that Pinellas actually gets. So state sets that, then we get some numbers, and one of the sheets that you have is going to be the third sheet, this Florida Education Finance Program. So this comes from the state, and this sets aside, or it says how the state wants the public education money to be spent. So some of it is going to be pay instructional staff, general use funds. It's going to be paying all of our salaries. It's going to be running your school, paying for the electricity, the very basic things. We'll call that discretionary or general funds. They're also going to give us something called the categorical. So, and we'll go through this in some of that. But if you look towards the middle of the page here, it starts with DJJ supplemental allocation. That's our juvenile detention. The state gives us a little bit of money to put towards that program. We're required by law to use it for that program. So we can't take that, whatever our piece of this $2.5 million, we couldn't use that to pay for the painting of your building. It's set aside by the state for that specific reason. As we go down this list, you'll be able to see educational enrichment, ESC guarantee, federally connected student supplement, mental health, safe schools, state funded discretionary contribution, which is really part of the family empowerment scholarship program, and student transportation. So state sets aside these buckets of money, and they force, I don't know if force is the right word, but the only permitted use of those funds is for the reason that's listed. And then these funds all get audited by either the state or our external auditors, and we have to prove in lots of extraordinary detail that this is exactly how we set how we decided to use these funds, and that they were permitted for that use. So going back to our sheet, you'll see that that about this time of year, it'll be in later this month, we will be going to the board workshop, and we will be telling the board how we anticipate spending the district's money. There are teams of people that have to go through and figure out how every dollar is going to be spent. We have 150-ish schools or related educational spaces. We have 14,000 employees, right? And so we have to figure out how to manage what will end up being from the state a little less than $1 billion, or about $1 billion. And we have to figure out of the 250 different departments and cost centers and the 150 schools, we have to figure out how we will apply or allocate each of those dollars to all of the various things that the district wants to do. That's not only people, it's initiatives, it's educational programs, it's being able to take care of students that are across a wide spectrum. It's being able to, and I don't mean just physical, it's mental, it's it's behavioral. There are all of these considerations at every one of these schools that has to be taken into account. So Ms. Woodford and has a group of people, we have a budget team, that this is what they do. They go through and they try to determine how many units, how many instructional, how many people have to be at those schools, how many dollars have to be spent on instructional material. How much is electricity going to cost this month or this year compared to last year? Are we going to have a hurricane, right? Each of these things are in our mind, you know, and so we go through, there's hundreds of calculations that we have to do and analysis and worksheets to be able to make sure that every school is adequately staffed and managed. And just like the schools, it's the district departments, you know, it's payroll, it's legal, it's teaching and learning, it's central athletics. There are departments throughout the district that all require this level of attention to make sure that they have what they need, but that we're very intentional on how we spend the money, so that there's never an instance that we're spending money on something that we shouldn't, right? Because the way that and we'll get into this too, but the way that government works is that we're allocated funds from, in our case, the state, basically, you know, a little bit from the federal government, but most of this is from the state. And we have that obligation to spend it correctly, because we can't go out and like a company on the outside. We can't go and sell more product. We can't go sell another widget. We can't, we don't have that ability. We're allocated funds and that's it. If you overspend your funds, you get in trouble. The state doesn't like that. And so,
Hey, Gary, can I?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share one of the things that we do that's a piece of this is budget, the area superintendents and ESC, Chief Long, myself. We sit down with each principal, every school, and we go person by person in their school. We spend days and days, weeks doing that. So the principal comes in, we go item by item. How many teachers do you have? How many do you need? How much support staff do you have? HPOs, we go every item, try to balance and look at that. So it's 150 of those meetings going on, and the state was really late this year releasing our numbers, and so things were tight and people felt that. But it's very time intensive, but it's very specific to every school and the number of students at their school. The executive directors are involved as well. And so, their schools come in and they're advocating for things, and we're weighing whether or not we can allocate units at schools based on their needs. And then what we do is we go tight because we know a certain number of students aren't going to show up. And it's harder to divide kids up at a school and then take a teacher away. We try and avoid doing that. So all summer long, we're talking to the principals, looking at the number of students in every class in our district of whether or not we need to add a unit. So the other day we had 14 on a wait list for a pre-K unit, which is our number that we know makes it pay for itself. And so we added a unit, but we don't do that until we get to the 14th student. So it's not, it's not a random thing. It's very intensive. So that's one piece on here of what we do when units are released, and we know our number of students that we're projected to have in the district.
And since Gary just brought up the fund balance of the reserve, because a lot of people don't understand this at home, we are at the very, very edge of legal fund balance. I mean, we're at the very low end of the 67 counties in Florida. We're like 66 in fund balance. We don't have a lot of money sitting around, regardless of what some people think. They're spending their money deliberately.
So kind of as we just pick this up again, and later this month, we'll be going to a workshop. We'll be answering their questions as well. And every board member kind of has their area of expertise or their area of concern. And so we will answer all their questions, and then in July, we will present our budget to the public. And there will be a board meeting, and we will have people that come up and there'll be slides of presentation. And we will talk about how we're going to spend $1 billion. And $1 billion seems like a lot until you start thinking that there's 14,000 employees and there's 150 schools and there's, you know, the numbers get pretty small pretty fast. So that'll end up in September in a second hearing if things go well. And then the budget gets approved. And then guess what? We get to start all over. You know, so this is a never ending process. And I was talking with Ms. Whitford and Mr. Hendrick this morning, and, you know, even after the budget gets approved in September, then make sure we spent the dollars the way we said we're going to spend. You know, so it's managing that, reporting, verifying, proving, adjusting what happens if you have a hurricane, how do you deal with that? If you have other emergencies that happen, you have an AC that goes out of school, how do you fund those things, especially if you didn't intend for that to happen in the cycle that it did, you know, so it's a never ending process of making sure that we manage funds appropriately and intentionally.
The number that always hits me to make me realize the $1 billion is our power bill, which is
$32 million.
$32 million we spend just on power. And so when you start thinking of costs that are that large, it starts making you kind of understand that that number always hits me.
So that's the budget cycle. That kind of takes you through a typical year. The next document to kind of look at it, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds on trying to like show calculations, but some of this will be interesting to some of you. But like I said, this is the document that the state provides us. This is the House version because there's not agreement on what our budget will actually look like this year. And then this document is this kind of graphic that has the flow chart is the calculation that we go from the big state number to our Pinellas number. And again, not to get too far into this, but it is important. So the first item is, of course, going to be what's called the unweighted FTE. This is the literal number of students that you have in all of the classrooms and all the schools in the district. This also includes charter schools and the students that are part of the Family Empowerment Scholarship. Those are not going to be traditional students in our case, but they may be private school students or homeschool students. The program cost factors. So at the bottom or towards the bottom of this sheet here is going to be some factors like basic education, pre-K through 3, 1.108. That means that, and this, I'm going through this because it just shows you the methodicalness that we go through in this process. These numbers are provided by the state, but it says that a pre-K through 3 child costs you as an average, let's put it as 10.8% more than the average student across the board to provide an education to. If you look down a 4 through 8th grade, there's going to be an even, that's their base standard cost. A 9th through 12th grader, so a high schooler tends to cost a little bit less to educate. And this is the number of instructional minutes. It's the instructional materials, you know, it's a culmination of all of the things that a school has to provide to be able to educate each of these groups of students. More important on this is going to be the ESE and the ESOL groups of students. So if you have somebody that is a level 4 or a level 5, that can cost between 3.5 and 6 times what it costs to educate a basic 4th grader. And when you think about public education, and in that realm of public education, think about charter schools or private schools. Where do typically level 4 and level 5 students end up? Is it in a charter school or a private school, or is it in public?
It says 8:30 to 4:30 on my calendar.
We have the burden of those students, and so these factors are very important to us because this means that for a level 4 or 5 student, we get some additional funding to cover the cost of that. Now, in a lot of cases, this isn't even enough money at this to cover someone that needs a one-on-one or needs extra assistance throughout the day. You know, those are extraordinarily expensive to us. We have a state obligation to educate those students, and we do, but it does take a lot of funds to be able to manage that correctly and with purpose. So when you look at those program cost factors, they would take all of our students in the district, they would apply all of the individual factors to each of those students, and they would come up with an average for the entire student body of our district. And so on average, it costs us 8.7% more based on our student body. So that's just a number in this calculation. What that does though is it gives us something called a weighted FTE. When you try to compare 67 districts across the state, the state legislature has to have a way of saying, how does our district with all of its unique components compare to Broward or Brevard or Polk or
And I got that.
anywhere, it goes well, right? Every county has its own unique and diverse set of students and its student population. And so they have to try to figure out a way of saying, this is the total bucket of funds that we're going to allocate at the state level. Now we have to figure out how much we're going to give to each of those 67 school districts. And so they use something
It's on
called
the
weighted
flyer. I'm
FTE.
not looking at the flyer, I'm looking at my calendar.
In this case,
The flyer is
our
on the- it's
99,000 students that we literally have that many students in the classrooms. We're going to get funded for 107,000 students. Other districts may be in the opposite direction. If they only have, or maybe only even, you know, that they only have. They want to put it like fourth grade, right? And so they would have a different cost factor. So the state starts their process by saying,
Okay,
how much
Good luck.
should a
sorry.
average student receive in funding? How much does the state want to spend on that individual student? Just student John Doe, that's just plain Jane. And so every year, there's something called the base student allocation, and that is the fundamental base funding that the state says we're going to give every student. So in this case, it's going to be this year, we're anticipating, it'll be $5,381.49. That number is also shown on this page in the BSA. Last year, it was $5,330. So they're giving us about 1% more this year to educate an average student this year versus last year, 1%. We look at your house, have your utilities gone up? Have your groceries gone up? Has the cost to buy clothes gone up? We're giving 1% as the increase this year for our students. So,
Gary, can I go back to the
Yes.
electricity? How much more do we think it'll be next year than it was this year?
well, Duke was nice enough to put a surcharge of 19.8% on all of the residents of Pinellas County, including the school district, from March to March. And so that will cost us about $4.5 million. And that comes out of our 1%.
Can I ask a question on,
Yes.
we were talking energy, is it just Duke that you guys, that it is?
Duke is our electric company.
Well,
for-
I
for the
live in
county.
Oldsmar and I know we're in
Oh.
Tico, so I didn't know if the schools in Oldsmar use something, if they're on Tico. if they're on
I don't
Duke.
actually know.
I'm just curious.
Duke is our largest vendor.
Yeah.
At about 32 million.
But yes, I think we have multiple.
Okay.
And then of course, it's all the other utilities, the gas and the sewer and the garbage pickup and everything that certainly doesn't stay even year to year.
Is everybody good at this point of yes, I just want to make sure you feel comfortable to ask them
Oh,
questions.
yeah, and ask questions. I'm good trying to work through anything that you.
It doesn't do any good if we just talk and then you don't walk away feeling like you learned a little. It's very complex.
It's insane.
And yeah, hi.
Pam
Pam.
Morse from John Hopkins. I don't know if this is true or if it's rumor, so maybe you can help us with this. But we have believed for a long time that the charter schools after about a month or 2 months. And they've got, essentially, they are going to end up being ESE students that they can't handle. So they send them back to us. We get it every year. But the funding doesn't come back with them. The charter school keeps the funding for that student. Do you know if there's truth in that or not?
So.
I'm sorry.
No, this is good. So 3 times a year, I think it's 3 times a year, there is, the state does, or we do. Well, yes, several major counts and then some final counts. Where we have to demonstrate to the state, the actual number of students and type of student that is in each of our schools. And so, as long as that student were to move by February, we would get a portion of the funding for the year. If they moved after February, we would not receive any funding for the year.
So Pam, the first one's in October. So let's say little Lee is at a charter school and he comes to us mid-October. The charter school's gotten that funding for that FTE and then he comes to us. If he doesn't stay with us until February, that's the next time we collect an FTE.
Yeah.
So it's cycles. It'd be impossible to chase all of it, but it is possible. And we do know that, you know, if we remove a child from our system, we still educate them at DJJ or our EAS sites or virtual. We don't have the opportunity to say we're just not, you know, educating. Other schools do have the option to say you're no longer welcome here, and then they do return, and we track them. We track the number of students that started with us or didn't start with us and move in and out of charter, homeschool, EAS. I actually meet with that department every other week and look at those numbers. Bonnie Selinsky, who tracks every single student, so I could tell you month by month the change of that and what's going on.
I don't think I've ever heard the phrase little league.
Little League.
I
Will be my
was- even when I
example
was
every
little,
time we meet now.
even when I was little, I was big.
Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much.
I appreciate the questions.
Do vouchers work the same?
I'm
What's
sorry.
that?
Do vouchers work the same?
They are supposed to work the same way. This year, I believe that if you've been paying attention to the news, there's been some discussion that the state hasn't been able to absolutely reconcile all of the voucher programs. And so we feel like it could be better on the state level.
And that's been a problem for us, and that's why the portal was opened so late, because they were having trouble reconciling some of that.
And just to say, we still haven't received the final third calcs yet. And so final calcs and estimates for next year, everything is kind of just out there.
But if a private school student comes to a Pinellas County school and wants to enroll between the dates, we have an obligation to educate them.
We enroll.
So we gotta put them in a classroom, support them, pay the people that serve that student, even though the funding hasn't yet been reconciled. So
But that's why FTE is so critical. You wonder what's the big deal? I have to count my students and sign, and we need every single one of them. You know, they're out, they're absent. We ask them to come in because otherwise, if they miss that time, we've lost funding for 4 or 5 months on those students who we know are going to return. That's why we freeze right before, so kids aren't moving around and we don't lose them. And I know as a teacher, sometimes it's a little irritating, but it really is every dollar into our district, and we can't afford not to get that right.
So basically, based off of the time that a kid comes and time that a kid leaves, there's a possibility that we could have a kid at our schools and we never receive funding for them.
Correct.
Okay.
Doesn't matter whether they're present on those
date certain.
dates certain. windows in October.
Before February.
Correct.
Gotcha.
You come in March, April, May, we receive no funding. You come in after the first FDE, leave before the next one, and then come right back, which at some of our schools occurs. We may get no funding.
And to exasperate that, if that's an ESC student, it's the same rules. We may have a one-on-one that we're having to provide that student, but if because of medical or whatever, they leave the system for the next FTE, well, that's on us.
And that's why the IEP is so important to get the right level of every student. You see, one level 5 is worth, and I don't mean it to sound bad, but is equal to the funding of 6 gen ed scholars in a middle school. And we have 14,000 ESC students. Now, some of them are just speech and most, they don't get a lot of services, but if we don't get that coding right, we're getting a 1.0 instead of a 6.064 on a student. And so again, I know sometimes as teachers, we're like, just let me teach, but that funding is important because they come and go and getting those things right.
Do the EPs count also for extra funding?
They do. It's a small amount and it's pretty much mostly in elementary school only, but it is a little bit. I think there might be one course in middle that changes, but it's pretty much an elementary funding supplement.
To share one thing on the FTE that's not, and I have a question for Gary afterwards, but that's full-time equivalency between the student is enrolled with us for the full day. And then it gets fractional. So there are kids who come in for part of the day, so we would get part of an FTE. There are students who take the full schedule with us and they take additional classes through for virtual school or elsewhere. So that's a portion of that child. And so I won't get the weeds with it, but a student at a high school that has 7 classes that takes no other classes, we're going to get 7/7 of the FTE of that student. A student at a high school that takes 7 classes and 2 more online that aren't associated with Falls County Schools, we're going to get 7/9 of the FTE for that student. It's all proportionalized too. So it's full-time is how much that student is taking, or a homeschool student that comes in for 2 classes with us, which is great. We're here to accommodate all students. We're going to get just a portion of it. Makes sense?
Now, I know that state funding is dependent upon how many students we have coming into the system, but isn't there also a portion of our budget that comes from the millage rate based upon property taxes here in Pinellas County?
Yes, we'll walk through that here further.
I jumped the gun, sorry.
Great. So as we're going through our list here, the next item on this is going to be the comparable wage factor. So you may know just intuitively that Pinellas County is an expensive place to live. And so because of that, it costs the district more. People are paid generally more here than they may be in rural county elsewhere in Florida. And so the state tries to determine how much more expensive is Pinellas County compared to other or an average district or county in Florida. And so they assign this factor 1.0025. Yes. Oh, Jim? No, I think so. This. All right. So they come up and say that it's more expensive than Pinellas. This means that we do end up getting slightly more money, a little more than $1 million a year in support of our higher costs. So the numbers are fairly small, but it does everything of course adds up. Brings us to base funding, and then we have our categoricals. And I guess we don't need to depend on what level of detail we want to do, but just understand that at a very basic level, the state sets aside funds to support the initiatives that the state wants the school districts to facilitate. So if they want safe schools, they give some money to they set a law, and then they send the districts some money to support carrying out those rules. And most of the time, the funds that they supply us for these categoricals is not nearly enough to satisfy the obligation that we have. And the very best one here is going to be mental health assistance. They give us $5 million a year to support mental health. It costs us close to $35 million a year to put people in support roles to support that.
Psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, all the supports in the schools, $5 million is not going.
Yeah, so we have an obligation to provide those services, but the state doesn't give us appropriate funds to manage those. And the same is gonna be for safe schools. They give us almost $10 million a year to manage safe schools. We'll spend close to 20 just on officers and other support personnel to manage, you know, the safe school obligations that you have at each of your places.
Sorry, can you please repeat what you just said with how much it was?
I think that it's about
16.
16 million.
Yep. They give us 9. We spent just, actually just under 17, but that's your
Okay.
campus monitors, your police officers, all.
And that doesn't count the officers and other support staff that we might have at extracurricular activities, sporting events. You know, any of those. That's just the instructional piece. So when you get to the total dollars, $681 million, that is the funds that the state is going to allocate to Pinellas County to run our school district. Now, there's other funds that come to us on top of this. And we'll kind of go through that, but I think this is a good opportunity to talk about state funding versus local funding. So everybody that owns a house or property knows that you pay property taxes on that house. You pay lots of different types of property taxes, so lots of different entities, municipalities, and groups. So as an example, I believe that the school district accounts for about 35% of the total taxes that you pay on your property. The county, and depending on where you live, it will vary. Sometimes kind of substantially, but you're paying county taxes, you're paying fire department, your police, your libraries, your anything else.
I taught economics and I had brought in a property tax bill and showed people.
Yeah.
We're paying split mud out of our property taxes. Split mud is where you get your water, which is for Pinellas piped out of Fernando County. And that's part of your property tax.
Absolutely. So the way that the state, though, decides how much property tax the school district is going to levy on its citizens, there's another formula. So everything's formulas. So the big things out of the way first. We have our referendum. That was a 1 mil passed this last November, and that is an easy one to do. It's always going to be 1 mil of your assessed value or your taxable assessed value on your property. There is a capital outlay levy. So that is going to be for major projects, the HVAC, the one-to-one initiative for student devices, the maintenance plan for the schools. And that is 1.5 mils. So that means that for every $1,000 of property tax value, that's going to be $1.5. The remainder is a little more complicated. So there's two pieces to what's left. One is called the required local effort, and the other is the discretionary millage. So the state says that in order for you to get state funded from the state portion of the FEFD, so the state contributes a piece of a pot of money. In order for the school districts to get their share of the state money, they have to levy a set rate. So in the year that, or this year, this upcoming year, I believe that we're at 3.105. So it's going to be a little more than 3 mils is what the state says we have to levy, and we're not given a choice in it. If the school board, for whatever reason, decided they don't want to raise or to improve that property tax, the school district simply wouldn't get state money. So we're kind of forced into that scenario. And then the state says in their calculation that there's 0.748 mils, and that's been the rate forever. 0.748 mils, and they call that a discretionary. So the state says, if you want, you can levy that. You have, if they want you to levy it, it's in the calculation. If you didn't, the state's not going to make up those funds, you know, as part of the FEFP calculation, but they make it, make each district say, you have that choice. We don't really have the choice, but they give us that option. They call it discretion. So
It's voluntold.
voluntold, that's the word that I should remember. So about 3 3/4 mils is going to be what you're paying for the regular general operating funds of the district. So I don't know if that answers kind of the question.
It being discretionary can be raised higher.
It cannot. It could theoretically be lower than the 0.748 mils. But that would be the option.
Why is it capped there? County regulation, state regulation?
State regulates that. The only thing that we don't, to kind of get into the weeds, the capital millage, is we levy 1.5 mils. Theoretically, some growing school districts that had lots that were issuing lots of bonds because they were building new schools. The state allows those districts to even charge more or to levy more than the 1.5 mils. But we don't fit into that. So when you look at our sheet here, you'll see that it says state in the middle, state and local FEFP dollars, $681 million. The required local effort, that's going to be what the state absolutely requires the local school, the local citizens to pay. So the state's nice. They say your district can have, and they tell us, can have $682 million. And they say your citizens will provide 452 million of that. We don't have an option. That is the millage rate that is set and we are forced to do in order to get any state money. So that leaves the state providing $229 million. So you'll notice that the local citizens provide 2/3 of the funding for the school district. Now, different counties are different. Our property tax values tend to be high in relation to other counties in Florida. And so that the state takes advantage of that and they say, you know, good for you, you can pay more if you don't bill. If you live in Hardy County, or other rural counties that had very low tax values, then the state is going to pick up, it's kind of reverse. The state's going to pick up the majority of funding for those districts. And because the tax base isn't sufficient for the local citizens to provide a substantial portion of it. So it depends, county by county throughout this week. So that gets us to the net state FEFP dollars, $229 million. The state just chooses to show it this way. They're going to give us $80 million to support schools that are losing enrollment. So that allows us to meet the class size obligations by hiring additional instructional staff for those specific schools. But again, that $80 million provides us, it doesn't solve a problem. It's just a contribution to a problem that we have. Yes.
So some districts have stopped following class size. You've probably heard of that. Because the amount of money that comes in to meet class size doesn't meet the extra units we have to put in our schools. And there's no fee, they're not billing the districts that don't meet class size. So what they've done in other districts is put 25, 26, 27, 28, 20, they just keep going up. And they're not meeting class size because financially it's better. As a district, we've we've agreed that we'll meet class size. We do it by bands of grade levels, not necessarily always class by class, because imagine if you went up by one child and we had to start another class. You know, so we found a way to make it work, but we do meet class size, and we make sure we track that so that we're meeting class size.
You're referencing the class size amendment?
Yes. I'm so sorry.
The last item on here is the state funded discretionary supplement. I don't want to say that this is a shell game, but this is just the state showing numbers on a piece of paper that don't actually come to the district. So we'll talk about that in a little bit later, but for the moment, just know that that's just part of the way the state calculates the amount of money that's coming to the state or coming to the district. And they will later remove those funds before we're actually funded anyone. That's going to the scholarship programs.
So just void that.
Sorry?
Void it.
Void, yes.
We don't get any of that. It's kind of a pass through.
So that's kind of the basis for the funding. Now I have a couple of sheets I want to show you just to kind of add a little more context to what is going on here. And I think you'll find these helpful in the whole scheme of things.
While we're passing that out, when you talk about the comparable wage factor and everything, the fact that we have this referendum that's been paid for voluntarily by our property owners, that puts Pinellas County in like the top handful of counties in the state in pay. We're like 6th, 7th in pay in the state of Florida. But that's because we've got that.
We wouldn't be.
We wouldn't be without the citizens being willing to tax themselves to make it better for us.
Well, it shows Pinellas County voters value
Yeah.
education.
Absolutely.
So this has just kind of been an introduction to the FEFP program and to the basic finances of the district. Now I want to get into a few of the things that affect different aspects of the budget, but all of these things end up being big dollar implications. So the first one is going to be this blue sheet. And this is showing the property tax values as a whole for the county. This shows the last, I think, 18 years. Wow. So what's really important is to know that this really affects referendum funding and capital funding, and a little bit of our budget. The state, like I said before, the state comes up with the total dollar amount that they want the district to receive, and then they adjust those millage rates to figure out how much the county will provide and how much the state will provide. When property tax values rise or fall, a piece of that, the 0.748 mils, is to our benefit or not, depending on how the property tax falls. But capital and referendum are directly to the school district based on the property tax values of the county. So the last several years, up until we had the hurricanes, we've had the benefit of additional funds coming to us through referendum and capital because the property tax values have continued to increase. Because of the hurricanes, it's interesting when I didn't bring it, but there's a sheet that shows the change in property tax values for each of the municipalities throughout the county. And so if you were down in St. Pete, you would see that property tax values have risen quite a bit. If you go to Indian Rocks, you're going to see that their values have done the opposite. You know, and so depending on where you live, you may either be the benefit of having increased property values or not. And so, but from the county standpoint and the district standpoint, the hurricanes really impacted us because what we would have on a capital side, we would normally get, you know, because of the steady increase in property values, we'd be getting, you know, 10, 12, $14 million extra a year in capital. Now that's going to to not help salaries, but that would help being able to refurbish a school or buy student laptops. And because this year, we don't have that good luck, we have to make either decisions of not spending as much money on student laptops or refurbishing schools or their general maintenance on their school, or we have to figure out how to pay for some of that out of general funds, which is not what we want to be doing. So
The
just
other
know,
thing, that's roofing schools, that's painting, carpeting, it's all that general maintenance. He's talking about new playgrounds, the courts, all of that stuff also comes out of that.
And
Gary, you had a question over there?
oh, yeah,
However, there is still an increase. This is almost an increase of 1% despite the hurricane. And the capital gains haven't been erased since the last year and the year before that. I mean, that's a jump of 13%, 12%, 6%, and the inflation rate has been bad. Cost of living has gone up. But
and
13
we'll
and
actually,
12% by financial standards is a
we'll
big amount of money.
we'll kind of talk about that in this page, which I think will be helpful to add a little context to what you're saying, but I do understand what you're saying.
we'd like to point out also with the referendum that there have been a couple of years where the property taxes have gone down enough that the referendum amount has gone down. So there's no guarantee the referendum is gonna go up every year. That also is subject to the property tax.
Absolutely.
Can I ask, does the projection for 25-26 include the new property tax exemptions for veterans? Or have we even begun to think about that?
I assume that it would, because these numbers have come from the county.
Oh.
So it's their estimate of what it looks like. This was as of, I believe, May 23rd. July 1st, just for timing, July 1st, the county will certify their tax roll. That's going to be what they will end up billing residents. And so that will be our kind of definitive line. Year over year, there's sometimes quite a bit of a difference between what the estimates are and what the county ultimately does. Well, either up or down. This is like the early estimate for them. To kind of go back to your question over here on the increase, I think that something that's very interesting to look at is CPI over time. So one thing that we look at, this is going to be this document. We try to look at how the state funding that comes to us varies year to year in relation to the CPI, or the price of goods increasing at the same time. So if you were to look at the yellow line, that is the base student allocation. That's the base funding rate that this state has provided us. We would hope that that amount would keep up with inflation, but it doesn't. The blue line is the most informative line on here. That is the CPI. And so if we'll think back to just in the middle of COVID and after COVID, as prices were rising precipitously, the school district also had to manage those same type of cost increases. And at one point that the amounts are on here. So in 21-22, the CPI in Pinellas County was 10.3%. That means that in 1 year, average cost rose 10%. The funding to the school district, however, went up by $60 on $4,300. So we don't, even though on the capital side, we do get some additional funds because of the increase in property tax values, though the use of those funds to buy paint or carpet, or to build remodel a school, or to build new classrooms, has gone up by that 10% in a year. And if you look at that over the course of the last 5 years, it's 25%. So overall, the costs or the prices that the district is having to pay, just generally don't keep up. There may be some specific examples where it does, but in general, the cost that the district has to pay doesn't keep up with the funding that the state provides us. Any question on that?
If you don't, just because Gary and I and most of us understand it, CPI is the basket of goods that the government uses to determine the cost of living, everything from haircuts to near a corn at the grocery store. It's everything, a bunch of stuff, all added up and divided out. And that's how you can compare year to year or area to area as far as the cost of living.
Right. The next document, lots more number, I like numbers, so, so this worksheet